Went to Portland and worked with the superintendent there, Bob Blanchard. He taught at Presidio, at Lincoln, and at Lowell. And he took his experience from places like Washington, D.C., the National Institute of Education, and other places, and applied it to this district. At the time of the Lowell decision, he was in the bilingual department, and he was responsible for coming up with the first plan in response to Lowell. And so you can see the range of skills and experience here, and I want to go right back now to Lucinda, and we're going to go right down, down the line here. And after, let them all speak, and at the end, you can ask questions. Okay, we'll do it that way.
Okay, great. So I'm very pleased to be here, and my journey began with my own childhood when I was in Mrs. Thompson's class at Washington Irving Elementary School. And there were 33 students in the classroom, and 27 of us only spoke Chinese as our first language. And I remember the demand that she made, and I loved her. She was beautiful, she had braids, she was attractive, and she just said, no Chinese. And so she constantly said, no Chinese here, no Chinese here, no Chinese here. And I began to understand that I wasn't supposed to speak because you have no Chinese if your language is Chinese. So, that message that is riding up here that teachers think about, and the student who's down here saying, what is that meaning to me? It was so confusing. And so I learned to speak English. I kept up my Chinese. My parents sent us to Chinese school after American public school. But when I became a teacher, and I went through the San Francisco Teacher Corps, this is a critical piece of information. I was not in the San Francisco Public Unified School District. I was an adjunct program that was connected with the San Francisco Unified School District with the Teacher Corps. I was assigned to Jean Parker, and Kinney Lau was in my class. And I had a big mixture of kids in the class. And about 3 months into the school year, Mrs. Lau, and she really is the key to what started Lau versus Nichols. She said to me, Miss Lee, you speak Cantonese, I speak Cantonese, Kinney speaks Cantonese. There's no reason why you can't teach math in Cantonese. Pull a group off to the side and teach math in Cantonese, because he's losing valuable time. And it gave me a thought. I told my boyfriend at the time, who then became my husband, who was connected to a person that worked at Neighborhood Legal Assistance. He says, we can do something about this, his roommate, my husband's roommate. And he said, we'll give it a try. And with that energy, Mrs. Lau's focus and advocacy for her child. And poor Kinney was just sort of sitting there. All these women running around. She and I banded together. We got the information to Larry Katz, who was my husband's roommate, no relation to my husband, my last name is Katz. And they took it to Ed Steinman. And Ed Steinman took it straight up to the Supreme Court. Now, this is critical that everyone was ready to move. Mrs. Lau was ready to move. I was ready to move. Ed Steinman was ready to move. My boyfriend and husband was ready to move to get us all connected. It takes that kind of energy and vision behind something like this to get it started. Then I went back to graduate school, and I forgot everything about it. In 1974, it reached the Supreme Court, and the decision was made. And I would tell you the following. Number one, that because of my childhood experience, I was motivated to get this decision moving. Cumulatively, over the years, my schooling made that difference for me. Mrs. Lau was key. That I wasn't part of the San Francisco Unified School District, but part of Teacher Corps, was really important. And that, for me, I haven't stopped. That this legislation actually spurred me on to understand the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. It helped me to change legislation in Illinois to get bilingual education and diversity and inclusion into the state system. It got me to the Chicago Public Schools as a chief education officer. I worked at the University of Chicago so I could talk about it to the students. It was so motivating that it is every part of my life. And so my life work now is to ensure that every student is understood regardless of learning background, learning style, learning disability, regardless of gender and gender diversity, regardless of economic diversity, regardless of racial identity. All those pieces of identities are so important to me that wherever I go, that's what I talk about. Right now, I'm running a school that's 30% students of color and about 20 to 25% low income and very affluent too, Marin Country Day School. And we still are working on this. We're still working on this. We want every kid to feel completely confident, competent. We want them to feel compassion. So those are 3 C's. And we want them to help work toward making the world a better place. So my time is almost up. I'm actually under by 3 or 4 minutes. The thing I want to tell you is that what happened from Chicago as I was recruited to work at this school in Marin was that I ended up in a school where Ed Steinman's son was at the school, where Lowell versus Nichols, Alan Nichols' grandchildren were at the school, and the teacher who started the ball rolling was at the school. All at the same time, 3 of us. Talk about stars aligning. Could you not have a better case for saying, you 3, you inherit this decision together? And I didn't realize that they were all there until I started working, and I said, well, this name Steinman, I know Steinman. He won't recognize me in the street, I'm sure. And Alan Nichols, with the grandfather, his grandchildren, basically the family said, don't ever bring it up. They were so upset by our name being branded as the anti-side.
Oh my God.
That they said, it's horrible for us. We want bilingual education. We want these things. The grandfather happened to be the board president, so that's why Lowell versus Nichols. So it's a very interesting setup. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really an amazing story, I have to say. There's no way you can, invent that kind of thing. It just happened that way. That was 2004, right? When you went down.
2004, when I took the position as the head of school at Marin Country Day School, and all these people that were connected to Lowell versus Nichols were all in the same place.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to Jennie.
Oh, thank you. It's a hard act to follow. But I want to ask a question of the audience because there's a reason why I'm going to ask. How many of you went to public school in San Francisco Unified in the 50s, 1950s? You see, I knew Gwen was going to, in the 50s. So I think many of you, like Lucinda, can tell stories about what it was like in the 50s. I was not San Francisco born. I was not San Francisco Chinatown born. I came from Pennsylvania in 1957 to start school in San Francisco. And my impression of San Francisco was, what is that all about? I told my father, and I was 12, I don't want to move to San Francisco. I want to stay in this little town in Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, where we were the only Chinese family in the town of 23,000. I was the only Chinese student in my class from first grade through 6th grade. And we were ready to move to San Francisco. And I said, I had just seen Blackboard Jungle. And I said, I don't want to have to mess with unruly students in the class because I'm afraid of the big city. I was a small town girl. So my father says, no, don't you worry. We bought property outside of San Francisco. So you don't have to go to that tough Francisco Junior High School and that tough Galileo where all the FOBs are. You're going to go to Marina Junior High School. And then after that, you're going to go to Lowell High School. And and I want to tell you, in that context, I said, okay, I had to believe my father. So the San Francisco Chinatown in the 50s were very well defined. And it was the thing to do to try to get out of Chinatown, at least in my father's view. And he was a paper son. I am a daughter of a illegal immigrant who bought papers and came with his paper brother and got to Angel Island in 3 weeks, managed to bamboozle everybody, got the heck out of California as fast as he could to join his real brother in Pittsburgh. And we had a Chinese laundry, typical. So my impression of San Francisco when I first arrived was, oh my goodness, I had cultural shock. Too many Chinese. I said, oh my God. I was glad I wasn't living in Chinatown, but my father took me to Marina Junior High School, showed the assistant principal my grades from Cannonsburg, and he immediately put into the high-track homeroom. Now, in those days in San Francisco, as somebody said in the morning, San Francisco was highly tracked, including homeroom at Marina Junior High School. So that homeroom was where I met 6 other Chinese students who were proud to have not gone to any Chinatown school. They said, oh, we were assigned to Sherman. We were assigned to Spring Valley, outside of Chinatown. So the group of Chinese students that I met